Okay, so I've missed a couple, uh, so I'm not sure how much I should say. I have a list of questions about this section, but I don't know. If you guys have some other place you want to start, I will defer to you guys first. Plus, I feel like shit, so
Do you have COVID?
I don't think so. I think my son got a something, that where he had a
Yeah.
cough and congestion, all that, and now I seem to have. I don't have the cough, but I had a sore throat, and now I feel like someone's pressurized my sinuses, so it's mostly congestion. Well, I'm not going to say what I was going to say because I'm being recorded, but this morning when I blew my nose, it was a very unpleasant and disgusting experience. I'll put it that way. So I think
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, that's it. Brett Bettelheim. That's the guy. Yeah.
Oh, Bettelheim?
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard of him.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that was the guy.
I found the title. It was
The
The
Uses of
Uses of
Enchantment.
Enchantment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the book. Yeah, and I think it's essentially a Freudian analysis of a lot of those classic fairy tales. Yeah, he analyzes fairy tales in terms of Freudian psychoanalysis, the meaning and importance of fairy tales. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Uh, well, I will. Again, maybe you guys already talked about some of these. I don't understand some. I just don't understand what some of the words mean that he uses. So he's got this term enfolding. Let's see, where did that show up?
I see that related to, I feel like, a theme that he's kind of wrapping up in the section we read this week, just on like preformation.
Well, yeah, that's another one. Preformation and enfolding. I mean, the preformation, I almost got the sense he was struggling for something like DNA, except that it's something that God implants into souls. That is that. Oh, enfolding is that. So you could.
Yeah,
Leibniz
the book is
Monadology.
it's all about folds.
I'm almost finished with that, and you're right, Chase. It's like kind of just stupid hard at this point. I'm just like so.
Yeah, I don't
Honestly, I started reading that and I got 3 or 4 pages in. I'm like, I'm not sure what Deleuze means by enfolding and unfolding, and it feels like a whole nother body without organs. He's gonna
There's
keep
been
about folding without telling me what he means by folding.
there's been some interesting parts, but it's definitely like I'm just, picking scraps out of a dumpster when I'm like what I'm learning taking from that book. But I guess my impression of the draws back, it's not going the deep end. Um, like I guess Leibniz, it seems a little bit more, you know, I like to think it seems a little bit more simplistic of just like the preformation, the seeds, the like a monad unfolds in its existence um through its life, and then maybe it like infolds at the end, like when it dies, and this element of him, I feel like I get the sense he's saying like a thing isn't destroyed in the end, it like just folds back up almost. uh that's the impression I was getting when he's kind of talking about like there's like, I'm looking at section 73. What we call generation is development and growth, just as what we call death is unfolding and diminishing. And just this idea of like, it's not that it's like being destroyed, but it's just kind of like folding back into itself. And what is it? Doesn't he reference this in other sections too? Of like the monad is still potentially like perceiving at this point, but there's no apperception. It's just all at that point like minute. Um, and the idea of like, I guess I don't know what Leibniz's thing of like eternal life or what his like stance is on stuff like that, but yeah, I get the sense that like the monad doesn't get destroyed. It just kind of like goes into this like dormant,
Ugh.
eternally dormant state. That's the impression I'm getting.
That makes sense. I mean, that never occurred to me, but that makes sense. That sentence in 73. what we call generation is development and growth, just as what we call death is unfolding and diminishing. So then maybe development and growth is, like you said, like an unfolding or and expressing outward, and then the death is just a kind of a like a flower, kind of almost like enclosing it back upon itself.
That's what I was thinking of the flower. Never when you were responding to Joey, like when a flower opens, that it's coming up. It's coming, and it's when it's coming out of the soil, and you see the stem, and then it starts to open, and then it can be part of the entire environment with insects, animals, birds, whatever. Yeah, unfolding is an opening.
And then that makes sense too, in that he seems to say, nothing is ever. So God, if I understand right, God creates, and only God can annihilate, which means that when things die, they can't simply disappear. So maybe that's the unfolding is what happens instead of destruction.
I think in some of the sections somewhere it refers to it as like natural and supernatural. Like there's no natural creation or destruction. I guess I'm maybe a piece that I was somewhat confused, and I think this is following that section, but from 73 to 75, I guess I don't really like grasp the significance of this whole like I'm looking at 75. Remain in their own kind. This idea of like things being like elevated to a greater stage, and this I'm recalling, I'm not sure exactly where it might say it, but something about like this happens at conception, but it's not like it wasn't preformed that way. I'm not recalling exactly how he puts it, but like there being some sort of like special thing that happens for like those monads or souls that are selected to be rational or human.
I had just a big question mark by 75. I don't really understand much of that. And it's like, what does he mean by, I don't understand what he means by spermatic. What the hell is that?
So it's
Seed-like.
almost like I mean I like read like evolution, like this like animals, some of which are raised, and then I'm saying some of which are remain in their own kind. And so there's some sort of like distinction there between those that can kind of like go to a greater stage. And that to me just kind of I didn't really like see where that plugs in.
Yeah, so that the animals raised by means of conception to the level of larger animals may be called spermatic. So that's the same thing as this kind of that would be development and growth, I believe. So the idea with pre-formation is you've got these minuscule little forms, and they're like seeds. That's what sperm really means, seed. And then from these seeds, you can get this unfolding. It's like a seed. Think about it, it's just like extremely compact, that all of its future actions are kind of embedded in it, enfolded within it. And then through the activation of conception, that would then be an unfolding where then it develops into just a kind of a larger version of that form that's already there, embedded in the seed. So you think it's kind of like the way you think of a seed, like a tree or whatnot, similar to that. And that's what he's getting at, is that there's just these transformations and metamorphoses instead of these whole complete like creation ex nihilo every time there's a conception. And that also has to do with like he's got this weird theory of death, where there's not really, basically there's no real death, but instead you just fold back into these seeds, and yeah, same thing. You got just like a continuity kind of these souls that are always embodied in some way. And that's what you've got, kind of like so these seeds, the spermatic of animalcules, yeah, something like that. Little animals. So those would be, they're kind of all the same in that they're just kind of sensitive souls. They don't have minds, they don't have reason, they're not human yet. And then once conception starts, that unfolds a kind of specificity to them, where then those that are human would then be raised to, they would just simply develop their form of humanness. But the thing is, yeah, they're all sensitive animal souls, so they're animated. But then for a human to be developed, that would then be, the soul becomes more than that. It becomes then a rational mind. And that's what he means by, this is, it's typical, like the human is, because it's elevated. It's, yeah, we give it ourselves pats on the back in terms of value judgments versus the rest of all the other animals. So, yeah, I think that's what he means by that. It's kind of the same thing of, yeah, an unfolding, a development, except this is like the one that's particular to humans.
So I have a question in that 75. So he seems to be drawing a contrast. So you've got these animals that are spermatic that let's see, animals, some of which are raised by means of conception to the level of larger animals, are called spermatic. And I'm interpreting that in the ways that you just described, kind of this like seed thing that then develops into this bigger thing. But then he says, but those of them which remain in their own kind, namely the majority of them, are born, multiply, and are destroyed like the larger animals, and there are only a chosen few which pass to a greater stage. So, one, he seems to be drawing maybe I'm misreading it, but he seems to be drawing a contrast. Like but those of them which remain in their own kind, which it sounds like he's saying those that are not spermatic, uh, namely the majority of them are born, multiply, and are destroyed like large animals, and there are only a chosen few which pass through to a greater stage. So one is, what is this? What kinds of animals are these that it looks to be like they're not spermatic? And then the other one is that greater stage rationality then that you were at the end of
Yeah,
that thing?
so all the animals are spermatic,
Okay.
or that they're all seeds, but then yeah, that greater stage. So I think what he's getting at here, this is basically just a distinction between non-human animals and humans. And indeed, it's rationality. He has kind of the typical Aristotelian definition of human as rational animal.
Okay.
So that's so um humans too are kind of indistinct from other animals while in seed or sperm form, but then through this development that happens with conception, uh, that's when the seed will turn into a larger animal,
Okay.
and then and that's also when humans will get their specific humanness, which is different from all the other animals, in that it's then elevated to having a rational mind, where the others just don't have that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Kind of.
It sounds like it's easy to make fun, but I think it's interesting, it seems like you can see him on this transition, part of this transition into, what became contemporary science, because he's struggling with things like you said, like these seeds, and to me it seems like almost like a proto DNA kind of a thing. Like there's this pre-formation, there's something there already implicit in the seed that then is going to develop into something else, uh, which is
Yes, but Chase, when you were first talking, I thought that the broader point about unfolding, about how living things develop, was he was saying that that's true for both animals and plants. That it's just not bang, you're there, fully formed, but that there is a process over time.
Right, right. Yeah. Which, yeah, that's so he says animals, but I think that would include plants as well. I think animals, he really means living creatures, I think.
That's what I was gonna ask, because then the distinction that he makes, the whole spermatic thing, it didn't make sense. Like Neva was saying, it sounds like on the second one that it might be non-spermatic animals, but it's like you're saying, I guess an animal to him is something that is living, not a rock, basically.
I'm
Yeah, so
recalling.
a plant would have the same kind of go through the same process of, having a seed and then developing in that and still containing the same form and then just simply growing that form into a larger form. Although it shouldn't be seen so much as just a simple difference in magnitude, as if it's like you would zoom in and there'd just be like a tiny little plant or animal or whatnot. But uh I think that's how most people would see it based, and it kind of sounds like that. But anyways, yeah, Joey, I interrupted you. So
I was just going to reference the lecture I think that you had shared in their Discord, Chase, of that dude who does Holmes, does all those lectures. I forget what his name is, but I think on the board for his lecture, he touched on like the four types in the hierarchy of monads. And I can't remember exactly what they were called, but on the bottom he had bare monads, and on the top he had like the prime monad, which was considered to be God. And in the middle, I think there was like, I'm not sure how he divvied up between like plants, animals, and man, but there was four. I'm remembering four in that hierarchy. And my impression is that bare were just like, matter, but that still might be considered to be like monadic.
yeah, I think so. I think what Leibniz is doing is something, at least this is the way I kind of thinking of it, is sort of um Aristotle's great ladder of being, and specifically that you have kind of a stage in between. I'm not sure would be at the very bottom, just, bare matter. I don't know, but you've got uh souls, suke, and that's going to be what animates things. And then you've got, reason, rational animals, humans above that. And I think the fact that you've got this connection with, well, the word animal, it comes from the word for anima, soul, animation, and I don't think that's lost on Leibniz. Um, but I think there's kind of this Aristotelian basis to that and that's what he's thinking of in terms of this hierarchy, is that he's trying to do that and think of, that's why he calls all these things souls, is because they're, that animating principle of things, and that's kind of what everything has, that aspect. I think even the bare monads still have, minute perceptions and whatnot. But then yeah.
Yeah, it's the impression I've been getting too.
Yeah, that notion that every living thing has a soul goes back at least to Plato, probably earlier, because they talked about you plant souls. And so, your plant soul just does reproduction and nutrition, and animal soul does those two things plus perception and movement, and then the human soul does all those plus reason. So he seems he's drawing on that same thing. Although, like Chase said, it seems like for him every thing is proto-living. It seems to be almost like a kind of panpsychism in that well, I don't know. I tell you, I'm actually kind of confused about this because he talks about sometimes he talks about matter as if everything is composed of monads and every monad is like, I don't know, proto living or something. But then he makes these distinctions between matter and living things sometimes. And like when he has that fish pond analogy, he says, a fish pond is living in the sense that there are a whole bunch of living fish in there, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not living in there, but you can still call it living because there's a bunch of living fish. And I mean, that confuses me because then does that mean that there are things that are not proto living? And another confusion in the same vein for me is when he's struggling in the additional text, down in the Theodicy about with this, he's struggling with this relation between soul and body, which which Descartes really turned into a huge problem, because if you're going to have a soul and a body, how the hell do the two communicate when there's such, as Hume makes this observation, how can you say that there are these two complete different substances that interact? How the heck do they interact? And so Leibniz is working really hard on that. But I guess one thing that confuses me about that, if everything is monads, or if everything is a constellation of monads, even physical things, even matter, even supposedly lifeless matter, even supposedly unconscious, non-conscious lifeless matter, if everything is composed of monads and if every monad reflects the totality of reality to some degree, then why is there any problem with communication between souls and bodies? Because if an entelechy, or whatever he calls the kind of monad that is a soul, is a monad, and it reflects the totality of reality, and every other monad reflects the totality of reality. And if physical bodies are constituted by by clumps of these monads, I don't understand why there's a problem with communication between soul and body. But my suspicion is I'm missing something in that picture. There's something wrong there.
I don't think there is a problem for Leibniz. I think, and I'm looking at section 80, where he says like Descartes made this a problem, but for Leibniz, it's just their pre-established harmony.
Right, but the thing is, the pre-established harmony explicitly denies any direct action between mind and body, because the whole idea is God set up this pre-established harmony to make it appear as though the body is responding to commands from the soul, but that's not really what's happening. God set the structure up so that the whole thing plays out where it appears that way. But so there is no real interaction, no metaphysical interaction, or maybe I should say no physical interaction. But I don't see why there couldn't be if everything is just monads. I mean, if a soul is a monad, and if physical things are constituted by monads, and if every monad, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this statement is wrong, if every monad has some aspect of life and consciousness, or at least life, right? Because he says like it's life all the way down. It seems like he says something like that at one point. I don't see, and if they're all reflecting one another infinitely, it seems like there's plenty of room there for there to be communication and interaction. So
I'm recalling the sections where he talks about like action versus passion and confused versus distinct perceptions. And my impression was that like a distinct impression is like the reason or the mind or the soul basically is like intending, has like an aim, like a final cause that it's aiming at. And this might kind of like explain the efficient cause of like monads that are considered like lower than, submissive to the like these dominant monads, and that from their perspective they would be like in a confused state of perception, like they're operating from efficient causes versus like final causes. But I think like in the grand scheme of things, like, and like I'm trying to like wrap my head around the fact that my impression is that he leaves space for some sort of compatibilism. Um, but I don't know if there needs to be communication, because although I like heard the example given of like I can still be free and say I'm like making spontaneous decisions and say I'm going to go to this restaurant, I'm going to make a spontaneous order. There might still be someone like outside of time who can see what my order is going to be and designs like a robot to just like operate in relation to me, just the, you know, in happenstance synchrony with me, like saying words and ordering this dish, and when I say I'm ready for my food. And but the idea being that like I'm not really directing that robot to do anything. He's just maybe running through a program that's been pre-established beforehand. And like, you know, I'm under the impression that like I told him my meal and then he walked away because he heard me. But maybe someone just programmed him to like go stand there for 1 minute and then walk away. I think that's the idea of like the body is just programmed to carry out all these things.
Yeah,
It's not
I
actually an order coming from the mind.
Okay. That said, this sounds like a Phil K. Dick
Novel. Go ahead.
I mean, I think that's right. But I guess maybe where my fundamental confusion is, and that I'm probably missing something, is he seems to make this distinction. I mean, it reminds me of Spinoza and the sort of dual aspect thing, because it seems like you've got these mental, or these, I guess, mental monads, and they have a certain kind of causation that is involved with intentions and, like you said, final causes and goals and stuff. And then you have these physical, I guess, monads, but these physical things that operate purely on efficient causes. So you know, the one is operating according to intentional causes and so on. The other one's operating according to efficient causes. There's no direct interaction between the two. And then, like you said, because God knows beforehand all the things that I'm going to do in my mental world, he can set up the physical world so that it tracks perfectly with that. And so that's why, I mean, it sounds again like you've got these sort of parallel worlds running together that God synchronizes. Um, but maybe, I mean, I guess again, part of my confusion is he seems to be then making a really hard distinction between mental monads and the monads that constitute physical things. And I thought that there was some fundamental similitude, or something fundamentally the same about a monad per se. But am I wrong there? Is it just like literally there are mental soul monads, and then there are physical monads, and they're like the two modes, you know, that are
Yeah.
I think there is that hierarchy that's happening. And like I would say it's like more than just the two, but there's a hierarchy.
But the weird thing about the hierarchy, though, is, you know, I remember where you're talking about, where it seems like, you know, you've got a soul monad that kind of governs all these other monads. But that governing, if he's right that there's no direct interaction between mental monads and these other monads, that hierarchy is again something that God is taking care of. Because if there can be no direct action between the mental and the physical, which he seems to be committed to, you know, that God has to do that, because there can't be this interaction. And so even that hierarchy is not, I mean, it seems to be something that God is just imposing on the world, because the mental monad can't control anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a so the harmony is almost like a convergent circle that kind of encapsulates everything. But so I think the distinction that um so yeah, he's got this thing of you've got monads more or less that work through final causation, or I mean, I think maybe you'll want to call this just the souls, I guess. Yeah, really, it's kind of like body and soul is kind of like the distinction on this level, and the soul, works through final causes, and the body works through efficient causes. So I think that would correspond with um monads would be the souls, but then bodies are the composites. So it goes back to like the very beginning where he's talking about, okay, monads are simple. They're not composed of parts. And I think that's the big difference. That's so kind of what things are indeed they're souls. That's what monads are. They work through differences in perception. So each the world that they enfold within themselves is one that they perceive, and they perceive it in different ways between, degrees of clarity and confusion. So that's what souls are. And then you've got somehow, he doesn't really explain this, but you somehow get from simple monads, there's, yeah, like the whole hierarchy of monads, but that's kind of its own thing. Then you have composites, which are composed of monads, and those are made out of parts, and they've got, they can be infinitely subdivided in all these things, and they've got some interesting properties that also are kind of like the monads. But then, yeah, I see what you're saying that, well, what exactly is I think that the problem, at least for me, is I'm not sure exactly how he gets from that jump from the simple to the composite exactly. Uh, but it seems that at least like those are the two levels that are operating. And indeed, they don't have, so there's no actual causation between them, because so each one is a substance, and a substance, so this goes back to, we're still operating with more or less Descartes' kind of definition, or almost Aristotle's to a certain degree, definition of substance, where it's this idea of like a self-standing, independent thing. So substances, that means basically there's no causation, like they wouldn't be, substance usually is not so much like a passive thing in terms of a billiard ball kind of causation. So each substance, it can only have a causation on itself, self interacting, and that's that's where, yeah, you don't have, the interaction isn't between different substances. And instead, each one is kind of, from the very beginning, like clockwork, engineered by God to be perfectly aligned with each other. But indeed, they're all kind of separate. And it's kind of like Indra's net. So you think of it as the visual. You've got a spider's web, and you've got these dewdrops kind of in each node of the web, and each drop reflects all the other ones, and then those reflect all the other ones. So you've got this kind of infinite reflection within reflections, and but each drop still is separate. And I think that's what he wants to do with the monads, because they're independent substances, And that's also kind of a condition of freedom for him, I think.
So I've got a couple questions. One, so I got like you said, I thought that everything's made of monads. So physical things are composites of monads. Is every monad a soul? Because if that's the case, then even physical non-conscious things are constituted by soul monads. So
Yeah, I think that's right.
okay. So then that's another reason why I'm what's the difference between the monads in a rock and the monads in a animal and the monads in a conscious thing? And then the other thing with regard to, again, I agree. It seems like he's saying this business about every monad reflects every other monad. So there's this kind of infinite, reflectivity which is why you can say every monad reflects the entire universe, though closer monads more accurately than further away ones, it sounds like. But if that's the case, when he talks about passions, that sounds like monads being affected by something. And I thought that what the passion, as opposed, like you said, every monad is sort of self-actualized. But then on the other hand, it seems like monads have some sort of passive, they're sort of, they have, seems like passive, reactions to things, which I thought was part of the reflection insofar as they reflect these others. They have these sort of passions. And that sounds like they are being affected by something outside themselves. So
Yeah, I think so that passion thing. Yeah, so kind of what I said about the monads aren't all just uh active in that sense. Just yeah, there are passions going on, but I think what those would correspond to, that's where the hierarchy of monads would come into play. So I think it would be that the active monad, which would be, oh, wait, okay. So usually he'll think of it as you've got kind of like an organic body of some type, and then there's usually one monad that is at the very top of the hierarchy that is dominant, and that is the active one, or the most active one. He probably, I'm not totally sure about this, but I'm guessing, like Spinoza, he'll say that the only thing that is completely active is God, substance, but then, well, not for, never mind. That's different. But yeah, so the passions, I think that'd be the submissive monads. They would be engaged in some kind of a passion, and that would correspond with, you know, the whole big pre-established harmony picture that's set up where it says, okay, the all the organic monads that say compose a body will have to be submissive to the monad of the mind, say in a human body. And then those, I believe, that would be considered something like a passion would be. That's kind of, but it's not exactly, it's there still wouldn't be a influence in the sense of efficient causation, I believe, with between the monads at least. But you do have efficient causation between the composites, the bodies.
But I just put this in the comment, but submissive sounds like there's some kind of interaction between monads. If you say that the monads of a body are submissive to the monad that is the soul, it sounds like the soul is somehow exerting influence on these other monads.
I think I'm recalling like sections where he's talking about like the ideal or like his idealism and the way he kind of sets that up where like things do ideally have somebody edit my language. to make it make sense. But doesn't he say stuff about like things ideally have had influence on each other, but it's almost like it's not happening in real time, but that rather like God made the selection based on like this infinite set of monads to choose some that like were in harmony with each other, which like I think that's supposed to be some way of leaving room for the fact of like there was maybe some element of like influence, but like God was the one who like plugged them into each other so that they could just kind of like run out their paths together and happen to fall into line. And I'm trying to connect that, I'm having trouble, but trying to connect that to like his sense of idealism. And
So
I'm looking.
are you saying then that appearance of influence? So, for example, if you have a soul monad and you have a collection of monads that constitute a body, that the influence that the soul has on the others is only a well, it's indirect, or I'm not sure what the right word is. It's not a direct influence, but it's just an effect of God having set things up such that it has that appearance that this soul monad is actually controlling the others. Is
That's
that the
the impression I was getting. Almost like God looks at an individual monad and sees like, oh, it's asking like for a particular set of like bodies and objects to move around it. And I'm gonna like find another monad that asks of the same kind of congruent movements to happen around it. And then I'm gonna put those in, right? It's like, why do we even need the indirectness at that point? I don't know, but like I'm recalling that like his this sense of causality is like ideal. It's almost like it's proxied through God's like understanding or his will. I'm trying to think of like that triarch kind of thing, the Trinity thing, but yeah, it's like proxied through God's reestablishment.
That's a good point, Joey. I think I'm the way that's kind of how I'm thinking of it in terms of the way there's it's almost like the God makes a formal cause on the whole of it. And so the things that exist because they are a piece of the harmony of the greatest of all possible worlds. So by analogy, right? The C, I can play some notes on a keyboard, a C, an E, and a G, right? I've just played a major chord in root position, right? The C doesn't cause the E, doesn't cause the G, right? And together, each one of them is ignorant of the whole chord. And each one is ignorant of the harmony that exists between the three of them, maybe. But neither one of them caused the chord, but they're selected. The C is played and not a C sharp in this moment because this moment's calling for a C major chord in root position. So the reason why it's being played is because it fits into the harmony. I'm the creator of the sounds. I bring this into existence. It has a harmony with something else. You know what I mean? It didn't choose, the C didn't choose to play the E, didn't choose to play the G, didn't construct. Yeah, there we go. Well, goodness. I mean, that was my favorite section actually from the Schopenhauer when he went on a kind of music theory cosmological journey, honestly. So yeah, I mean, yeah. I have a little bit of music theory under my belt. I like jazz, extended harmonies especially, right? And syncopated rhythms. But I digress. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I keep getting onto this harmony thing, right? I think that's a big piece of Leibniz's views here, and I think it ties into kind of how Joey was described. I think that's consonant with what you were getting at, Joey. And I see it in terms of not efficient causes or final causes, but a overarching formal cause for the whole of it, a holistic formality. Every piece has its place in the harmony. It is what it is because God chose it to be there.
Yeah, and to support that, I mean, to support that analogy, that the fact that you use the word harmony, yeah, invites that comparison.
Yeah, I think that is a really good analogy. I mean, it may even be more than an analogy. It's I mean, harmony. I think he probably means that it almost in a literal manner. Possibly, I don't know. That's kind of beside the point, but yeah, I think that's really helpful to think about how, each thing, each monad is doing its thing, and then the fact that it's doing its thing, and the fact that its thing was already planned out ahead of time by God means that when it actually plays out, it seems to all go together, even though at the same time, it all goes together just because each separate thing is doing its thing. And but yeah, I think if you think of him as I remember he makes some kind of a distinction, but he talks about things as appearances, and he says that talking about causation between things in terms of appearances, that's legitimate to do as long as you understand that it's for the apparent world. And so you can think of it as, yeah, there's an appearance of causation and interaction and all that. He would say that's perfectly legitimate. But then maybe, on a metaphysical or speculative level, on that level, then you have to understand that, okay, but there are really more these indirect uh harmonies more so than they are actual interactions or causation between substances. It looks that way. Appearances. Yeah.
I guess maybe another analogy would be like a ballet or something like that, where you have all these people, doing they're all doing these individual things on the stage, but then you as the audience see the whole system interacting and portraying some kind of story or something. But you could think of it as, I mean, granted, in reality, these individuals have that in mind. But you could imagine a system like, I mean, literally, you could imagine automatons, right? Some automatons that are programmed to do these motions on the stage. But when you watch what happens, you see this whole story unfold.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, and even, this is the 17th century where mechanics, has just come, I mean, he's obviously Newton's competitor in terms of calculus and whatnot, but who's kind of the arch, mechanistic physics. And the way that he talks about automaton, I mean, Leibniz, the way, or a lot of people, philosophers, scientists, natural philosophers, they're talking about machines and automatons and mechanisms and whatnot. And a lot of times, okay, so usually there's usually some kind of technological or media analogy that people love to use where, okay, books were invented, then suddenly, oh, the universe is like a book. You get the Bible and everything. Then you get clocks. Everything is like a clock. And I think this is still in this is the clockwork world. But, that's only one aspect though, in terms of well, I think at a literal level that he would think of the like mechanisms. My cat is meowing furiously at me. Which I'm pretty sure I know you can't hear it through Zoom, but y'all should definitely know. But yeah, so there's the clockwork thing, and that's definitely what he's thinking in terms of an image of thought. And then, if you want to go after that, then we eventually get computers, and then everything's suddenly a computer.
Right.
Or just think of whatever technology it is, yeah.
But what I wanted to, I've been trying to follow, Nevitt's questions and in yours and Eric's and Joey's comments. And forgive me for bringing up your cat, But how, from your understanding of what Leibniz is writing in this work, explain the cat's action right now. Is it predetermined? Is it part of a hierarchy? Is it because of a binary relationship with you, or is it something that is the essence of the cat that is independent of you? You know, that you're just there, but you're not in any way causing by your presence the cat's action. The cat was going to make that noise, you know, if it was in the house by itself. You're reacting to it now, but there's another issue. Well, the cat and you do interact with each other. I mean, how can you separate the catness of the cat action when it's in the same domicile with you and you've been interacting for a very long time? Does that make sense? Why I'm bringing this up? Because it seems to me that sometimes I'm getting a sense of massive determinism, right? That it's, well, yeah, you know, and you use the clock metaphor, and I appreciate that. You know, it's just, okay, everything's spun out from, you know, it was already written in the stars long ago that we'd be having this conversation, because there's certain essences about monads, about every single, at least living thing.
So here's my response. I'll let
right when you finished it, I just heard my cat meow again. Okay,
his
so go ahead.
reaction.
The cat wants to know too. What is Leibniz's explanation for it?
So I think that I think there's text to support this. I think that he said that he says that only rational beings or rational monads have any degree of freedom. And so the impression I get is that Chase's cat and my cat and all the other cats are really just machines. So there's this vast conglomeration of monads that are not rational. So they're souls, but they're not rational souls. And so everything, even rocks, I guess, are composed of those. But cats are constituted by these things. And my sense is that so if you leave rational souls out of it, I think the entire world just clicks out according to a perfectly deterministic causal mechanism, you know, just regular efficient causation, just doing its thing. And that cats, because they're not rational, are part of that. And then,
can I very quickly?
Sure.
Let's accept Leibniz's explanation, you know, the broadly defined, you know, the monads, but we could disagree with his analysis that cats and dogs are not rational, right? I mean, couldn't it still work? Couldn't his broad explanation work, even if we took issue with his underestimating the rationality of these animals?
I think possibly, yeah. But let's just, for the moment, let's say they're not, and they're just part of the mechanical world, and then I'll try to respond to that. So then my sense is, then you've got these rational monads that actually are free, and you know, these rational monads make these decisions, but because God can view the entirety of time at once, God knows, I think this is the automaton thing. God knows from the beginning all the free decisions I'm going to make. And so that my rational monad is going to make. And so that God doesn't make me do those things. It's just that God knows from the beginning what I am already freely going to choose. And then God arranges my physical body and its mechanical effects, efficient causal effects in the physical world, such that it follows perfectly in parallel with those free choices that I'm going to make. And then I think if you said that animals were like if cats were rational or had some degree of rationality, which I'm pretty sure he would deny, but if we said no, we're going to incorporate that, then I think he would just do the same kind of a thing, that to whatever degree a cat is free, that soul monad is going to be doing these free things, and then God already knows beforehand what that's going to be, and so that God arranges the cat body to track with those free decisions and so on. That's my sense of the way it's so the free. I mean, I'm interested to know if you guys agree, because that's my sense of what he means by freedom. It's that, yeah, these rational souls make free decisions, but since God already knows what I'm going to do from the beginning of creation, he doesn't make me do that, but he knows what I'm going to do. And so he just arranges the world to work out that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. Um, so he doesn't think that I mean, I think if anybody's familiar with Boethius, the medieval philosopher, he came up with the idea of kind of a so God's foreknowledge, God is able to see your free actions, but that foreknowledge doesn't determine them. And I think Leibniz also takes that approach to a certain degree. I'm recalling a quote where he will say that it's not so God's foreknowledge of everything doesn't determine everything, but instead it inclines things. And indeed it's I think by establishing the nature of things, that nature then is an inclination, but still the actual free act, I think that comes down to that individual responsibility, because we've got to maintain the system of judgment. Individuals have to be responsible and must be punished, because individuality is a juridical notion. So John Locke said. I think he's right.
Say that last thing you said.
So actually it's not individuality. So John Locke said that so personal identity, that oh no, he's okay, this is the actual quote. So the person is a forensic idea, in that you could go to court and the idea of a person is kind of who is responsible for this. So his idea of personal identity was based off the idea of kind of in a court, if I could say this person is responsible for this or not, that's basically the question of personal identity or not. And I think Leibniz, being a good Christian, he wants to maintain this system of judgment where the individual is responsible for their free acts. That's the benefit of freedom, is that you're free to now be responsible for the things you freely do, which means being punished for them. So, amen. God is good. Cats are better. Actually, I think
What?
Shinobi is definitely maybe he's not like God, but definitely a closer degree of reflection than probably most anything else. I mean, just look at him. He
What did you
was
say your
down.
cat's name was?
Shinobi.
SCH.
Like
Here, I'll type it.
I mean, you take the cat to the vet, right? So they have to have a spelling of its name.
There is something I did want to mention that I think I saw Deleuze mention this, but I feel like I picked it up in this section. that I kind of just appreciated, but I was getting the sense of like the idea of like a body that's kind of chosen to kind of just like match the soul's perceptions in terms of like to what extent they're distinct or confused. I feel like is very much in contrast to like the idea that like I am confused because I have a body, because the natural world, as opposed to like, well, no, the natural world has been like selected to mold on to my soul, which like has its own inherent like confused or like, you know, I guess confused perceptions. And the idea that like every monad comes with its like pre-given set of confusion and distinction, as opposed to being kind of like totally clear and I have to like figure out how to negate the body or work around the limitations of the body. Instead, that the body is like perfectly matched to the fact that the soul comes with its set of confusion. And I guess to me that kind of felt like a very different conception from a lot of other ideas, systems, philosophy.
You know, one thing that doesn't, or that I'm, another thing I'm having trouble with, why is it important that each monad reflect all the other monads? Because if God is going to prearrange everything anyway, what's the point of the reflection? You know, I mean, if God, you know, if like so for example, I was thinking of that, you know, each like the what this monad experiences passively as passion is due to I'm not sure about this, but is due to the reflections of all the other monads upon it. But then if that's not if God has to actually, I don't know what, inject those passions into the monad, then what is the point of that reflection? So, you know, maybe I'm missing something here again, but if God is arranging, why can't these things be just completely closed off, completely non-reflective, you know, completely absolutely independent substances with you know no connection of any kind whatsoever, including reflection. I mean, if God is going to always arrange them anyway to do whatever they're going to do, why do you need this whole this infinite reflective thing?
The first thought that comes to my mind is like maybe it's not that like he had to put the whole world in the monad, but say he chose one monad and based on everything it perceives, he just kind of created a world like around that. And I guess this element of like the most perfect world is that like all the monads like almost like just happen to reflect everything around them. Um, I'm getting the sense of like when you say that, I almost feel like does that question not take us to like why something rather than nothing? Because I guess I wouldn't distinguish that. Like if the monad didn't reflect the whole world, like what's happening inside the monad? And like why would God have chosen what to place around the monad if not from what he saw inside the monad? And I guess like this like most perfect or the best of all possible worlds, like it would be better, I guess. My impression is it would be better if like the whole world was kind of constructed from within how each monad is perceiving it. But I don't know. Maybe my question to swing back of like, does that question differ from why something rather than nothing?
I'm not immediately seeing why that why that one question raises the other. But I wanted to respond to something you said because it kind of made sense to me. Even if so, you know, so um, Chase said that monads are windowless, which I assume means they don't actually affect one another. Um, And so each reflects the other, but that reflection has no real effect of any kind on anything. So what's the point of the reflection? But then what you said made me think that maybe the point of the reflection, it maybe I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but this is what it makes me think, is that that infinite reflection positions each monad very precisely within the system, so that in order, for this monad to, if it's reflecting all the others, but it reflects those that are nearby more than those are far away, and so on, that its totality of its reflections is going to very precisely locate it at a particular place in the system. Is that kind of what you were getting at? And then that is the most harmonious arrangement.
Yeah, so I think one term that will help is point of view, because that's so each individual thing, it's what makes it distinct and different from other individual things is its point of view, which that would be its particular way of reflecting the whole universe, which is also not something separate from what is prearranged or kind of like injected into the monad from the very beginning, but like that is what it is. Both what the monad just simply is its reflection of the whole universe, kind of embedded in it, and then it just unfolds that. So that's that's kind of like the folding aspect. It's kind of the reflection that is particular to it is its point of view on the whole universe. And each universe, or I mean, there's only one universe, but each point of view is going to be correspond to a monad. And that's also what the monads are. They are their perception, which also, yeah, has to do with, these degrees of distinction and confusion and distinctness and clarity and whatnot. But yeah, I think the best way to think about it is that they are separate. They are closed off. They're really, and it's really just simply that they've got God kind of injecting the whole universe into each one. But I think even that is kind of, so it's not so much there's kind of like, I don't know, maybe other people are different, but I just inevitably envision these monads as spheres.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
Shiny balls.
Like metallic ones or clear,
Exactly.
or maybe not, yeah, but
Little steel BBs.
yeah. So you got this sphere, and then I imagine, like a picture of the classic God, like beard and like a toga or whatever. Why does God need a toga? I don't know. Anyways, and he's, injecting like the universe into the spheres of the monad. But I think that is misleading in the sense that the monad is its injection. It is its point of view. It is its perception of the whole universe, indeed, so that's how things don't really interact, basically. They don't really interact. They're separate things, they're individual. And really, it's just that each thing is unfolding in its own way. And eventually, this gives you the appearance of one world in which there's appearances interacting, causing each other, and blah, blah, blah. Which is, the consequence of all these separate, infinite amount of separate souls all being injected by God. He's wearing his damn toga for some reason. Yeah.
So another confusion here is that perception sounds like something is being affected, like it's perceiving something, which means it's taking something in from the outside. But is what you're saying, is that even those perceptions are really, as you say, injected by God. So it's not that, because if I say, like, I'm like you, I think of them as these little shiny steel balls. And if this little ball is reflecting all the other balls, if I call that perception, then my sense is then perception is, again, something that you're taking in. Like, I perceive something, it has an effect on me. But are you saying that even the perceptions that these little monads have are actually, as you say, injected by God rather than actually the effect of all these other things around them?
Yes, I think it's more so that it's not the effect of the other things around it, although God will inject it so that it appears that way, which is the confusing thing, but it is what it is, I guess.
So if all of that, like if this monad, if all the totality of the reflections that it collected were to, in a sense, enter into it, but they don't. But if they did, that would be what God injects in there.
Yeah, right.
I might say like not even God injecting in, but it's almost like God taking out and dispersing everything else around it. Like
Yeah,
the stuff
so what he
in
fills up
the
the
monad.
syringe with is every other monad,
I
which
imagine
is
God like taking a syringe, putting it in a monad, pulling out the perception, and then injecting it into the world around it. And then you get all the other monads. I mean, there's not one primary one, but like I'm imagining that like already there's no injection, right? I mean, Chase, you said it like the monad is what you would be injecting. Like it just is that.
yeah, then there's no world also that would be separate from the monads. The world just is the totality of all the monads,
I guess I'm
except
recalling
God. God's God's different from the world.
I'm
Classic
recalling
Christian theology right there.
I think it's somewhere in the Leibniz, maybe Deleuze makes reference to it, but just this like to me it seems like simple idea, but like point of view doesn't like come from an individual, but like the individual is its point of view.
Right,
Like
right.
it's not like this kind of subjectivity is not like, oh, it's subjective. Like every individual has their own point of view. It's more like, no, every individual like is their point of view. Like they are kind of like a reflection of like just where they stand and the things that are not injected, but the things that are around them is.
Yeah, I know there's one. Um, it's quite quotable that something that Dulles says that he's gotten a few books, which is when he's talking about relativism, he says it's not a relativity of truth. Instead, it's a truth of relativity. So, in a way, you think about it as like it's objectively perspectival instead of it's all relative, man. That kind of thing. That's exactly what he's saying. Like, no, that kind of like, oh, it's the way people talk about subjective as like, oh, that's subjective. Yeah, that's not what perspectivism is about. Yeah, and I think that's definitely yeah. Things are, it's like it's an ontology. The being of the beings is their point of view, which is their reflection, which is also the way that they enfold the universe in their own unique manner, or the way that their concept includes all the events that will occur.
So you think that when you say unfold, are you using it in that sort of technical, not Leibnizian notion?
Yeah, trying to at least.
So then so the totality of the perceptions of everything else is a kind of enfolding of the entire universe into the monad.
Right, right.
But that's actually something God has to do because the monad itself is completely closed off.
Oh, well, yeah, I
So,
mean, God at least has to first, you know, I guess first created all the monads and then arranged their content. That's probably not the right word. Um, but then, so I think the fact that it is enfolded, that it's included in each monad. So you got the little sphere. Imagine like there's like a little, uh, imagine like a galaxy, like spiral formation in the sphere. Like the world, the universe is inside the monad, but that's what it is. It is the universe, but as reflected in its own unique, particular way, which is its point of view. Which is so, let's just me as an example. It'd be like, okay, I have my own perspective. So when you're perceiving something, you're perceiving the entire universe always. But the thing is, uh, obviously, most of it, the vast, vast, vast majority, is going to be these minute, um, indistinct, confused perceptions. Only a tiny fragment is distinct or clear, and but then what is actually distinct and clear is kind of that's what determines really my individuality. Is I think there's something he says about that's kind of the relation of the point of view and a body is that the body is kind of like a high level of clarity in comparison to uh the monad that is like the dominant point of view. So, but yeah, it's I think it's hard to envision it. Well, okay, never mind. You got the picture right there. There it is. Monad. Got like a marble thing with a spiral galaxy in it. That's it right there.
that's from Men in Black. So
See, my impression is that it's not that marble, you might look at that marble and say like, oh, that marble's just out of place. It's just a glitched monad. It was put in the wrong place. It's not reflecting what's around it. But it's not, my impression is that the monads aren't like welcoming things into them. Like that monad kind of has what its point of view, and it just happens to be in the wrong place.
meaning this is not a monad in Leibniz's universe.
No, not the best universe. That monad is
Someone ripped it out of that, or someone ripped it out of this of Leibniz's universe
The worst possible universe right there.
and then stuck it in a cat's collar. Sorry, I had to include the cat because cats are
Oh wait, it's in. Okay, so I know this. Yeah, this is the end of Men in Black. So that's in the cat's collar.
yeah.
It,
Oh
They're-
God,
it
I
it's an
remember.
attachment to the collar. It's the actual
It's an
gouge.
actual universe.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually
I remember when I was a little kid watching Men in Black, and that scene blew my mind. But I was just like, oh yeah, that's how it is. Yeah, that's the universe. That's basically what's like. We have no idea what's going on. Yeah, it made a lot of sense to me, especially the fact that like the giant aliens were playing some kind of game with the different universes, which
Yeah,
yeah,
they're like
it's like yeah, that's definitely It's very actually reminds me of the Heraclitus fragment. Uh, the Aeon is a child at play playing drafts, like basically marbles. So the Aeon, God, time, is a child at play playing marbles. So there we go. Heraclitus knew all along. And then Leibniz rediscovered it. And then Men in Black brought the worst possible universe into ours and fucked it up. And now we're no longer in the best possible universe. Now we're going to hell, thanks to Men in Black and Will Smith. That's my theory.
But you're omitting Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, he's meh. Will Smith is the real star. Welcome to Earth. That's Independence Day. Yeah.
This whole best of all possible universe thing, which initially just kind of pissed me off, but I don't, actually, maybe it's just that because the stuff has infused itself into my mind. I don't really know. I mean, it seems like it's like Leibniz just kind of bit the bullet. I mean, finally, because if you're going to have a perfect God that is perfectly good, what the problem of evil is, how do you have a God that is perfectly good creating a world in which there is evil? And Leibniz just kind of bites the bullet and says, no, this is the best of all possible worlds. Because, yeah, you're right. God could only create the best of all possible worlds. Duh. And so this must be it. So, I mean, I still don't, nothing I've read really answers that question. Why does it have to be this universe, other than, well, because it has to be. But he seems to kind of say, well, it's a mystery, right? As to we don't have the perspective, we don't have the universal perspective to see that it's the best of all possible universes. But if you were God, you would see that it is necessarily the best of all possible universes. And in a sense, it's a very elegant solution to the problem of evil, because he just says, no, of course, God could only create the best of all possible universes. So obviously, this is it. There's a centipede. Why don't you knock it off and let your cat play with it?
I think I'll pass on that one. I think my cat will pass on that too. Yeah, it's just I guess that's goes along with the best possible universe right there. But yeah, good
I
old
beg your pardon for asking this empirical question, but what's the color of the centipede?
dark brown,
So it doesn't have any
lighter
brighter
colored
colors
legs.
on it? Does it have any? It doesn't have any brighter colors.
No,
Green
it's
or
not. It's not a
orange?
giant centipede.
No, no. What I mean is, they actually, some centipedes actually do bite, and they're
Oh yeah, yeah,
fairly serious. And I just didn't,
yeah.
because you said
This,
ceiling, it could be crawling above your bed and then just fall, and
yeah. I've seen the there's the giant ones, and then there's the ones that clearly bite but are kind of like this big. This is a much smaller. It's probably like that big, but it doesn't look too bad. Actually, that may be a millipede, I think. I'm not sure. But yeah.
A cicada got into our house a few months ago, and I tell you, one of our cats went absolutely ape shit. I mean, it was, good Lord, that cat went crazy because the cicada was bouncing around. And I grabbed the cicada and threw it out, opened the back door and threw it out. And before I could close the door, the cat went right after it. It was like, this is the best toy I have ever seen in my life. He was really thrilled about that cicada. But the problem is, he dismembers bugs, and then he doesn't understand why they don't work anymore. He doesn't get that. It's like this bug parts, and he's like move. He doesn't get that.
That's what my Chihuahua would do. He would jump on top of them like this with his paws, and then he would stare at it and be like,
Yeah, why is it not
walk
moving?
away. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell him you broke the damn toy. It's your own fault.
Yeah, cicadas are really intense. Their energy is like, oh my God, like this thing is so loud, and just the way they move and just these rapid, like yeah, I did see a cat being like, oh, holy shit, like, yeah.
It was very thrilled. And they're creepy looking. I mean, they're really creepy looking little bugs. I mean, they look like they're the kind of bug that would kill you, but they're pretty harmless.
Well, you
Yeah,
know
God,
what
look at that thing. It looks
Plato
like a
said,
monster.
yeah, Plato or Socrates, I guess, had some interesting things to say about cicadas. That they were muses or goddesses, I believe, like nature spirits were incarnate in them. It's in the oh, what's the name of that dialogue of uh not Phaedo, Phaedrus.
Idris?
Yeah, wait, no, it's I think that's right. The Phaedrus. The one where he uh Plato makes the case against writing, like putting things to writing in a writing, which I thought was always great. But yeah, it's kind of as Socrates going, this is where he talks about divine madness and whatnot. But as Socrates going outside of the city gates for the first time, first there's only one play where it's kind of like outside city gates, like we're not in Athens anymore. And Socrates is just like, oh, there's nothing going on out here. There's just a bunch of fucking trees and cicadas. But then the cicadas end up being these like muses or something like that, reincarnated muses. I can't remember. But yeah, we have gotten off topic. But it's the best of all possible worlds, so maybe we're on topic in a way. Probably not.
Well, thank you. I learned a whole lot, or you guys clarified a whole lot for me, so I appreciate that. Answered all my questions so far.
I think your questions were very important. We were missing that. Well, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. It's the goddamn COVID, but um, yeah, your questions are important. Help keep us on track.
Thank you.
Kind of, yeah.
Sometimes. I mean, frankly, actually, one of my weaknesses is I mean, this group, it's not that big of a deal because you guys, I mean, everybody's pretty much self-actualized. But when I'm in a group of students, I have a hard time breaking, I have a hard time guiding the discussion because I tend to want to let it go. And so sometimes I just let it kind of wander off into the weeds and rather than taking more. Oh, yeah. Douglas Adams. Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. There was something else that when we were talking, I can't remember. There was some other Douglas Adams idea that, oh, I remember it was one where like these people playing field hockey with, I can't remember, but it was like, again, it was like it was kind of like the Men in Black thing. Like there were these, these, I don't know, trans-dimensional beings playing games with planets or something. Anyway, similar kind of a notion. There is a lot of interesting ideas in Douglas Adams.
Yeah, that is very much Leibnizian right there. Like
That's
that's
amazing.
yeah, that's orthodox Leibnizian.
Took me a while to find it because in my head it was angel food cake. Right, so I kept just Google searches with angel food, but I found it anyway. I've had that stuck in my head now for 30 minutes. Since you guys have been talking about marbles on a cat's collar, and that's the universe. I was like, no, it's a piece of angel food cake. I'm sure Douglas Adams said that somewhere. right? Then I had to find it.
Now that's a perfect quotation. I think that the next translation of this book should have that quotation at the beginning of it.
Hitchhiker's
Well,
Monadology.
go ahead.
We should,
What's
we
that?
should we should write a commentary, right? The Hitchhiker's Guide to Monadology.
Yeah, it could be
That
one of
be
those.
nomadology?
Oh no. I was trying to find the reading schedule. Do we have just one more meeting?
I think so.
Yeah, that's what you said in the email, and then 2 weeks from today we have a bye. We not meeting, and then we
Start
go to
Mondays.
Heidegger.
Yeah, and I put a week I put a week gap in there because it seemed like a little much to finish Leibniz on a Friday and then start Heidegger the next Monday. Um, because we're going to have to read some impossible to understand stuff. And so I think I think we meet next Friday on Leibniz, and then the next week we don't meet, and then we start Mondays after that. And I mean, I was a little resistant to moving to Mondays because of the whole people who want to meet on Mondays are not the people who've been faithful. But then there have been people like Dylan. Like Dylan really wants to participate, and he works. He is a manager for one of these companies that sets up party venues for things, and he works a lot of Fridays and a lot of Saturdays. So he really wanted to join, and there was somebody else. So anyway, it seemed like Monday. I like Fridays personally, but
But were you gonna
Mondays.
get Hunter back?
He claims so. Yeah, he claims he'll be here on Mondays to talk about. Although he's not that thrilled about reading Heidegger, but he says he says he's going to be here.
He joined us for Faust.
Yeah, yeah, he joined us for Faust, so hopefully he actually he got a job a few weeks ago, and he works on Fridays until like 8 o'clock, and then he can't get home until 8:20, 8:30. So he says he'll be here on Fridays or Mondays. And actually I think Deirdre is she still in class, or is she still in the program?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Deirdre is from, I don't know if you guys remember, right? Jason probably doesn't, but Deirdre from the UTSA group.
Mm-hmm.
She said she might join, and a couple other people from UTSA had an interest.
Yeah,
So
well, I don't know. They're kind of flaky. They're like well, I don't know. I was about to be hesitant, and because this is going to be on YouTube.